I'm going to show you how I changed this into a digital sculpture and ultimately a painted print. Make sure to watch to the end. What's up YouTube, it's ZW again. In part 1 of this video, I walk you through how I started digital sculpting and my 2 years journey from here to here. If you want to know more, link in the top right and description below. For part 2, we are back to our regular scheduled program. Let's go. After sculpting the first 4 ranges, I'm getting a little more confident and excited to complete this collection. Red and green being the leaders of the squad, I think it's quite fitting to end this series by sculpting them. Of course, we start sculpting with Zbrush. In the beginning, there is not much sculpting involved because it's more of moving the clay rather than adding or subtracting the clay. I can honestly tell you that I have no idea what I was doing for his hair. It's supposed to be spiky, but mine is just, I don't know, I tried. So here is more or less the final version of the hair. For the purpose of printing at 1/6 scale, I think it's good enough. At high resolution, that is when sculpting happens. You can see me adding clay on certain areas of the head, moving the features from time to time, but most importantly, I think the focus is to keep that iconic droopy eyelids right, and the rest will come into place naturally. Now let's see the progress of Green Ranger, shall we? Oops, sorry, that's from 2 years ago. For Tommy, it's actually quite exciting. You will know why if you watch part 1. If you think about it, sculpting one Tommy Oliver would mean that I will have 2 new sculpts. One for the Green Ranger and one for the White Ranger. So 2 birds. And him being my favorite ranger, I definitely took the most time to sculpt him to make sure that I got his likeness right. His hair, when he was White Ranger, is definitely easier to sculpt since it's just combed back. His Green Ranger hair, on the other hand, is still quite fun, to be honest. I love how wavy it was, and it was really cool back when I was a kid. Looking at a long haired dude kick ass. So this is after adding pores, wrinkles, bumps and all the nonsense. Honestly, it's boring to me, so I didn't bother showing it. If you want to know how, leave a comment. Now we gotta get it ready for print. But what does that actually mean? As you can see, the neck is blacked out. It's called masking. But since we just need the head, I'm gonna invert the mask instead to just select the head. Now we can hide the neck and only reveal the head. After deleting the neck, we can fill the hole up like so, and this is where it gets a bit mind-fucky. Here we have 2 cylinders and 1 rectangle, forming this weird little shape, but by subtracting this shape from the head, we actually get a very nice hole for the neck of a 1/6 scale figure. And I want you to remember this hole because that's gonna mess with our molding process later on. Same goes for green and white. White was a little more complicated because of the ponytail, but it's the same logic. You just insert a peg from the ponytail into the head sculpt. Hey, do you know that my future is in your hands? Like literally. Please use those hands to click the like button and subscribe. Thank you for making it this far. I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. You know how I talked about 1 part most in the black and pink ranger video and 2 part most in the yellow ranger video? Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about 3 another 1 part more that I was experimenting with. Previously, the head was positioned upright, which was problematic because it has a hole to connect the neck. So air was actually trapped inside when I was pouring the silicone. So to combat this issue, I decided to invert the head so that the air can escape, which turned out pretty well. For casting, I found that adding a little dye to the resin actually slows down the curing later, which was really helpful because it only takes 5 minutes for the resin to start hardening. And if the mold had not been filled up by then, it's gonna be a failure. What I like about 1 part molds is how easy it is to make them. You don't require clay, you can use the mold just 6 hours later, instead of having to wait for another 6 hours for the second part to cure. But the disadvantage is how hard it is to get the cast out compared to a 2-part mold. Now it's time for paint. First, you gotta give it a base coat of beige. The trick to painting realistic skin tone is the layering of various thinned out or transparent colors. So instead of giving it a monotonous beige, you might want to think about the shadows or the highlights on the skin and the various blemishes, imperfections the skin might have. So I actually learned how to paint from someone on Patreon, and unless I've changed a substantial part of it, I don't feel right sharing too much about his method. But if you want a tutorial, I will link you to my Black Widow video at the top right corner where I shared some resources about painting. Boy, am I glad that I finally achieved my goal of sculpting the entire Power Rangers cast. This was actually a project back in 2020, and the likenesses were definitely poorer than what I feel I could achieve a year later in 2021. If I have the time in the future, I might revisit these sculpts, so make sure to subscribe. Next week is all about Star-Lord and Gamora, and here's a little preview. In the meantime, this is how I made Pink and Black Rangers. There's also a playlist of my other creations here. See you next Friday.